Start. Good evening. It's Wednesday, November 19th, 2025. This is a meeting of the Land Use Committee. I'd ask everybody to introduce themselves. I'm Jay Rose Pepe, City Council.
Eric Warden, City Council.
Scott Diener, council member.
Nick Bond, Community Development Director.
Jim Fisk, Principal Planner.
We have two items on the agenda. Does anybody else wish to add anything to the agenda? All right, we have two items. Take it away, Jim and Nick.
All right. We have been requested, McCormick Communities has requested two development agreement amendments, and they're the two items on the agenda tonight. We're going to talk about the proposed parks agreement first. It's really a parks and open space agreement. And if you go to page 2 of your packet, in Port Orchard Municipal Code, section 20.100.130, we have adopted minimum on-site recreation space for subdivisions as a standard. And this standard makes sense for new subdivisions to ensure that there's adequate recreation space provided. But in McCormick Woods, the entitlements go back, 30 years or so, and they've provided significant dedications previously. And the agreement that we have in place does not allow them to get credit for those dedications for these future phases that they're currently working on getting preliminary plats for. And McCormick has asked that they receive credit for the previous dedications and the things that they've agreed to do that still have not been completed. And I wanted to take the temperature of the Land Use Committee to figure out whether this is something that the Land Use Committee would support, in which case we will start drafting something for a more formal review. So I want to go to page.
Excuse me, could you back up the bus and say that again? Because what I heard, if it's okay, is they're asking for credit for what's previously done to apply to a new development.
That is correct, but it's within the master planning area of the original McCormick Woods master plan. And so McCormick Village Park, for instance, was a large land dedication that they made that was a regional park to serve this whole area. They also have put in other small pocket parks like Deer Park and Mary McCormick Park, and there's new parks that just went in between divisions 12 and 14. And then St. Andrews Park, which there's an exhibit for in your packet, is actually squarely located in between some of these new phases. And it's only because they've added some additional lots that they're now being caught up in the new code standards for new subdivisions. And that's what they're seeking some relief on. So I wanted to draw your attention on page 5. I had asked McCormick to outline everything that has been created and will be created in the future and put it on an exhibit. And they've marked up trails that were dedicated and required as part of the original subdivisions, things that they have done that we have asked for that they weren't required to do, but they chose to provide, and then other required park improvements. And what I did with there's six remaining subdivisions in the McCormick Woods proper, excluding McCormick West. And those are known as parcels F, H, J, K, L, and M. And those have been numbered on exhibits going back until at least 2013. And I think they might have even been in a 2007 agreement as well, the original transportation agreement. And what McCormick had done in recent years was they increased the number of lots that were in those divisions. It used to be, I think, around 400 lots, and now it's closer to 600 lots for those areas for the future development plan. Under the current code standard, that number of lots would require them to dedicate almost 5 acres of active open space or recreation space. And McCormick is wanting to get some relief from that because that significantly cuts into the amount of remaining land that there is in McCormick. And so I asked them to put together a proposal, and that is the map that has been included in your packet. So the proposal as submitted It does include a reference to the required St. Andrews Park, which is project number 18 on that map. And is it helpful for me to share my screen and point to things on the map, or are
If
you
you
guys?
don't mind, please.
Yeah, let me bear with me 1 second while I find my share screen button. So on the map here, St. Andrews Park is a large park that is required to be constructed as part of the future phases, which the lots that are all outlined on the right side of the page here, these are parcels F through M that I mentioned just a second ago. And there is an exhibit. They've designed this St. Andrews Park, which includes pickleball courts, I think some playground. I'm sorry, that's the McCormick Village Park. Um, These are big files, so they take a little while to load. Anyway, the St. Andrews Park includes, parking, an entry plaza, playground equipment, pickleball courts, an open lawn area, and pathway around the park. And so they feel like they're providing this active recreation space for these areas already under previous agreements, but they're not getting credit for it because of how they did their entitlements. Um, I told them that as staff, I thought that there were some things that the city would
Hey,
probably
Nick,
like to.
can I interrupt you just for a second? If you could go back, I'm going to go off course just a little bit
Yeah,
with the park diagram that you showed. Uh,
the St. Andrews.
yes. And I apologize, but if I don't ask now, I probably forget. But why is the restroom optional?
Uh, I didn't prepare these plans, and I don't think they've been approved yet, so I don't
Okay.
know why it says optional.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
We have just Scott. Um, we have we don't have in the parks that we have here. We do provide honey
Yes.
bucket in our parks. So does that
Okay.
not does that qualify as a restroom?
Well, I guess it could, but for a permanent facility, you would ideally want to develop permanent bathrooms.
Yeah, and
Like what we.
these are HOA owned facilities, and so this would be the HOA who's responsible for maintaining these. And the city folks who maintain our public restrooms can tell you that public restrooms like this are quite a bit of work. And so, we leave that up to the HOA and the developer to decide whether it's permanent or a honey bucket. And I think the honey buckets might be more cost effective for the HOA.
Yeah, and just the topography of it where it's located could be a sewer nightmare as well. You could put a pump in there that'd be so expensive.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just, I guess I expect more of public parks than honey bucket.
It's not a public park though. You
Yeah,
know,
this one's an HOA park.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, it's up to them, but I just think that, you're creating a nice park except for one area,
mhm.
one element. But I just was curious. That's all.
All right. So jumping back to the map, some of the improvements they've made, they included the map that showed the pickleball courts that they added to the north end of McCormick Village Park up here in the blue. That's Project
Mhm.
11. They've got these pocket parks in McCormick Village that were recently built. Eventually, there's going to be a loop trail that's a grade separated paved pathway through McCormick West that is public. They have the private which what are currently HOA owned trails through the wetland complex here, and which are supposed to tie into McCormick Village Park. And interestingly, when we went back and looked at the parks plan and the original county plans, these trails are supposed to be for public use, and currently they are HOA owned, and there is no public easement for this. And so that's one of the things that I wanted to bring up. But the idea here was that you could go from Square Lake Park all the way to Gorst through this corridor, which should continue into Bremerton-owned property just north of McCormick Village Park. So anyway, they're asking to reduce the amount of active open space they provide in these new subdivisions, and my recommendation to the land use committee is that we do provide some relief, but I think we should ask for more consideration from the developer. And I've come up with a list of 4 items that I think we ought to ask for. And I'm going to jump the first one that I want to point out. In the original first phase, when McCormick Communities took over this project, they left a lot of barren areas that were cleared and weren't really well established and replanted. And if I go into Google Street View here, I think that there is a lot of room for improvement of tree canopy in some of the divisions in the north end. And I think that gaining improved tree canopy in these HOA-owned open spaces would be a win for the city because we're now required to have tree canopy improvement under our NPDES permit for stormwater, and also we're just more generally we're focused on trees and improving urban forest conditions. The the other thing that I'm noticing about this exhibit, and because parcels C, E, and D in the northeast corner of the development were the first three projects that McCormick Communities did, we didn't have any requirements for pocket parks in here, and I think there's with St. Andrews going in at the kind of the south east entrance, I think there's room for at least one active facility in this area, and so I would propose that we give them some relief if they would also find space potentially at this north end of parcel F to provide an additional active play feature where families and kids can go so that they're not walking all the way across the neighborhood to get to the other parks that have been provided. I also think that consistent with the original master plan for McCormick Communities, we should seek to have an easement so that the public can use these wetland trails during daylight hours. We certainly don't want the public using these things at night or someone feeling entitled that they are able to camp there or something like that. But I think giving the public the right to use these as part of what was originally envisioned in the county's plan would be appropriate. And yeah, I think those couple of items combined, while recognizing all of the other parks that are still planned, including this Park 16 over here in McCormick West, St. Andrews Park, which is yet to be done, I think at least comes close to making us whole relative to what the code would otherwise require. And I wanted to see how this committee felt about that. And I think given where all of you live, I think you're the right people to ask.
My question,
Go,
Jay,
go,
thank
go
you.
ahead. Go ahead.
I don't mind the public utilizing our parks and whatnot. There's gonna be a lot of questions though. One of them is going to be that the homeowners of McCormick, they pay a lot to maintain all those trails. We have crews that go in there, a lot of homeowners. We have teams that go in there to make sure that they're safe, that they're cut, that they're maintained. The landscapers do go in there and do some work, but year round, we have people that do that. If it's open to the public, insurance wise, maintenance wise, there's a lot that goes into it more than just saying the public can use it. It's the liability of of the McCormick HOA. It's their property, and to open it to the public, I could see some pushback on that. How do you
Eric,
see?
sorry,
Please.
go ahead. I thought you were done.
No, my question. I have a question. That's more of a statement.
Okay.
But my question is going to be, Scott, you might know this one as well. Other communities on the peninsula that we might know, maybe Pierce County, other communities that we have, how is that treated? In HOA private property, how is that treated?
I think I can just tell you from what I've seen, which there's not a lot of examples like this out there.
Correct.
But what I have seen is that those HOAs are responsible for it, and yeah, there may be use by public, but I don't know if there's ever been a good way to address that. You, like for example, the spine trail that Nick was talking about. I think that's great. I think that should be available for the public if they want to transit from Square Lake to Gorst and beyond. I think that kind of transit is needed. But with the balance of the facilities, I think that it would be incumbent upon the HOA to figure out how they want to do that, how they want to limit accessed by the public. And I don't know if that's a pass or key cards or whatever. But I get where you're coming from. I just don't know that there's a good solution. And asking the city to take on these parks could be a solution, but that's a bigger discussion.
Okay. Can I back up the bus for a minute for both of you
Sure.
and go back to Nick and Jim? There's no agreement right now in writing with the current developer. I believe the current developer is the third developer to own McCormick, to have the trails open to the public. Is that correct?
So there is a parks agreement with the current developer, but it doesn't address these trails in green that are number two here, running along the spine. The only thing that addresses that is the original master plan and the permitting documents from Kitsap County, which said this was going to be open to the public, but that mechanism was never put in place by the county. We annexed it, and at this point, I don't know that I don't know that anything short of a court order could reopen that discussion. And I know this is a hot button issue because I've heard people say before, hey, these are McCormick's trails. These are not open to the public. And so if this is not worth pursuing, I certainly understand. But I think the original intent was for these to be open to the public, and it's something that is a reasonable thing to ask for if the city council wants to.
Okay. So let me back up the bus even further on this. Is that, right now, Eric, this is before your time, not before Scott and my time, that McCormick asked the city to take on maintenance of the parks, and we politely declined for the reasons of financial and bandwidth of that. So right now, I mean, my feeling on this first part that you're discussing would be I have no interest in trying to get through this legal quagmire, which is what it would be. We have people that use the parks right now, not the parks, I'm skipping the parks, go to the trails right now, off and on. And I think that that's highly invested by the people in McCormick Woods. So that one I would think would be a non-starter.
The spine trail.
The the trail system here, yes.
Yeah, I suspected that, and the only reason I mentioned it was because we found it in the parks plan.
Mm.
When McCormick asked for this agreement, we started researching the original requirements, and that's when we found the language that said this was supposed to be public. But I think that's a very difficult conversation at this point to be having. And so we can drop that from any counter proposal that we would make to McCormick. But I think the other three are probably less controversial.
Well,
So
I'll just go on one further, if you don't mind, both Scott and Eric, is they've you had said, if I heard it right, that there's still about 5 more acres uh, because of the density that they've uh, wanted to increase in McCormick Village. That is something that could be, worth discussing about how that would be, possibly split, because from historic McCormick to McCormick Village, quite frankly, you can see that there's a lack of both green space, and there is still a lot of sore feelings about Plat A when that was developed and that green space went out. Okay, I'll be quiet for a while. Eric and Scott, you're up.
Go
So,
ahead.
so before we go on from that comment, I just want to remind you that the code requirement is for recreation space, not passive open space. And
Right.
so if you get land, it's for active recreation, not for just passive trees and other things.
Understand.
Scott, go ahead and go first.
Well, so while I think it would be nice to have, and Eric, I'm sorry, Nick, I thought you were talking about mainly just the spine right next to number two running north-south. If you were talking about the entire trails network, I could see that as a bit of a different discussion. But while I think it would be nice to be able to transit from one geographic area to another, it's in the end, it would be nice to have, and if the community isn't supportive of that, if the McCormick community isn't supportive of that, I have no problem with that. My question is, what is it about use of the trail system by the public that they find perhaps overwhelming, or why would there be opposition? I'm just curious.
Perfect. It's really challenging. People maybe they're from McCormick, but McCormick works really hard with their neighbors to keep dogs on leash, to not have e-bikes going whipping through them. It's a real challenge.
That's
So
those things are happening now.
correct. But they're getting a handle on it because for the most part, they are McCormick residents. But definitely there's several that are not. And again, I'm not that person. You know, I feel lucky to live where we live, and share. But not everyone does. And I brought that up at the HOA meeting that Jay and myself attend. And we have a coffee with our HOA. And I did make the comment that I don't mind sharing. And a few people said, well, we do. And they brought up the reasons why. And that's kind of what I listed, is the maintenance
Okay.
and the liability as well. That's a concern, and a legitimate one. Um, so that's kind of why, is you start getting a lot of traffic in there and it's going to be,
Yeah.
dogs off leash, those things. Okay. My
Can
question,
I just check a box in my head then that
please.
there's no interest by McCormick in trying to have the city take over any of these parks, because then they would become public parks. I know that's
As
not on the table. I just want to make sure I have the broad sentiment of that.
I will say, as a resident of McCormick, I do not want we don't have a parks department.
Right.
I don't want, I'd rather have our landscapers and my dues pay for it.
Yeah.
Um,
I think I would agree if I lived in McCormick Woods too.
yeah. Anything else, Scott, before I ask the
No,
question?
no, that's it for now.
Okay. Typical, Kitsap County, Pierce County, whatever county might be your city, the amount of homes that are built, compared to the amount of parks that are scheduled to be built or are constructed. Are they on par for that, or do they have more than what's necessary, or less? And I do like the tree canopy conversation about kind of a compromise there as well. I do like that for those open spaces. But do you have an answer for that, Nick or Jim?
Well, I think that that's a hard thing to answer in McCormick because number one, there's a golf course, and number two, there are a ton of critical areas. And so in terms of mapping the amount of open space and active open space, I think McCormick has really high percentages of both things. But it's hard to do an apples to apples comparison because the amount of critical areas that get set aside vary from project to project. Um, the way the golf course ownership is structured, there's a lot of treed open space areas that are part of the golf course and not part of HOA owned open space. It's just a really difficult assessment to make. But one of the things we did a few years ago was we changed on the zoning map. We went and um, we started showing all the HOA open spaces, and the golf course is open space in our zoning map. And so you can actually see how much of the land is dedicated to green space essentially in McCormick communities. And it's a huge percentage. I mean, it's probably close to 50%. And even in McCormick West, which a lot of that is off the page here, um, there are huge wetland complexes in McCormick West that don't get developed, and at the south end of McCormick that don't get developed. But if this was all, if more of the land was developable in the first place, maybe that percentage would be lower in McCormick.
I would say, Eric, that
Yes.
this would not be too atypical of what we might see for a plat in Kitsap County. Um, but when you start folding in critical areas, it becomes much more challenging, and then you're looking at more passive recreation, um, trails development, and we also have a bench system that we use for um, square footage of recreation based on number of units. Uh,
Yeah.
it becomes more exacting if somebody wants to do a performance-based development where they are asking for a reduction in standards. But I see this as generally pretty typical of
Okay.
the subdivision and when considering the critical areas and use of the critical areas.
And the reason why I asked that is based off of when the developer mentioned previous parks that were built and wanting consideration for those. I was kind of wondering, as a whole. Now, obviously, we all know that McCormick's massive, and someone who lives near 16 doesn't really care if there's a whole lot of parks, in the older part, vintage part of McCormick. That's a long haul. They want parks where they live as well. Um, yeah, that's all I have. I was kind of curious if that is standard, the amount of parks per housing um, units. That's it.
Yeah, and I did the math on I just not all of the parks are in their own parcel, and so it's hard to calculate the square footage of parks, but just McCormick Village Park and St. Andrews Park are 43 acres in dimension. So the red area, number 18, and then where McCormick Village Park is. So the fact that they're required to provide 5 acres for 764 lots, and they've dedicated 43 acres for just in those two facilities without counting Deer Park and Mary McCormick Park and the new things in McCormick West. I think they probably meet the standards on the whole of what's required, if you're able to get credit for the past dedications.
Okay, definitely following you. What's your
So,
what's your opinion, Nick, of this?
well, I think in order for us to enter into an agreement, there has to be valuable consideration to the city. So we have to get a benefit of doing this. And, you know, whether past benefits, because this would be an amendment to an agreement, you could potentially think about the past benefits as being that valuable consideration. But they're asking for new relief, and I think we should get something new in exchange for that. And so that's why I was trying to come up with, what would we like to see happen out there? And that's where I identified, we really could have done better in a few areas on establishing permanent tree canopy and getting more plantings in. And so that was that shot, the screenshot or the street view shot from McCormick Parcel D, where I said there's areas that I think we could show on this map as being reforested. There may be some areas around stormwater ponds where there could be a little bit better landscaping. And then just looking at the distribution of these parks, the area that seems to be missing a park is the northeast corner. And so there's two lots in parcel F here right when you come in. And so either those two lots or maybe this open space area right behind it could be developed into an additional active open space area. And then people who live in parcel D, parcel E, parcel C would be able to walk to that facility, and that would be their closest neighborhood park. So I think if we were able to get one additional park, even if it's smaller than the 5 acres that the code would otherwise require, maybe it's an acre and a half. And if we were able to get them to commit to reforesting some areas, I think we could call that a win. And they're getting something, we're getting something out of that negotiated agreement.
And the part that you're referring to up top, you're not referring to like pickleball and stuff. You mean more like a big toy.
Well, it would be similar to St. Andrews, maybe a little smaller, depending on how flat the site is. But I think you would have a parking area, you would have some playground equipment, and
Okay.
whatever the community wants. I think the HOA probably has an idea, would tell McCormick like what are we missing or what do we need more of.
Can I throw one thing out possibly?
Yeah.
Okay, this has been kind of a bugaboo, and I've heard it from several folks that, and maybe I'm trying to. Well, I guess there is a way. Never trying to think of a way. Uh, where McCormick Park is, some type of pedestrian crossway, but I guess you could go up to the
Mhm.
roundabout.
Well, we are planning, we are talking about that, and we have programmed a project to do the non-motorized improvements on Old Clifton as a city project.
Right.
And so
Right.
that yeah, but that has occurred to us as well. It's really challenging to do that project as a standalone project without also doing the roundabout. And
No, forget it. Okay. Have to wait till the big one comes in then.
so is it safe to say that the land use committee would be open to recommending an agreement that included reducing the amount of space they have to provide in exchange for those enhancements to their open spaces and an additional small pocket park in the northeast corner? Is that something I can start negotiating and ironing out as a draft?
I think it's a starting point from my viewpoint.
Yeah, I think if staff is comfortable with it based on what you've explained, I'm comfortable with it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's
Um,
good. It's very good balance.
is the use of the spine trail, as I call it, is that a non-starter, Eric and Jay, based on what you know of the community? Or is it something we could ask them to consider? If it's a non-starter, I don't even want to ask them to consider it.
It's a non-starter.
It's
Okay.
it's a monster.
Yeah,
Okay,
But
fair
I'm good
enough.
with that. I think the status quo there is fine. And I suspect that if somebody from the public is walking out there and they're behaving and not on a bike or letting their dog off leash, nobody's going to say anything. And if somebody's
Happens
a
every day.
problem, it gets dealt with.
Happens every day. Yep.
Yeah. So, all right. The second agreement that we've been requested has to do with the McCormick Village, McCormick North area, and they're seeking to amend an older development agreement to provide them some relief from some of our standards, which they admittedly wish they would have read closer when we were working collaboratively to write these standards. Now that they're actually out there building, they're realizing that some of these things are really difficult to achieve. Um, the document here, starting on page 9, kind of outlines what they're seeking and what I asked them to write a narrative explaining the justification for the relief that they're seeking. And I think most of this makes sense to me. And it makes sense to me for a few reasons. Number one, I don't think because they own the entire development, they haven't sold any lots. There's nobody who is aggrieved by this or who's potentially going to be harmed if we don't do the things exactly as our code was written. In some cases, these standards, really, I think it's more of a clarification of the standard than it is. I think some of these things could be solved by making interpretations. They're wanting clarity, and because some of these things can't be solved through interpretation, they're just asking that we address it all in the agreement so that they have clear instruction on how to proceed. So the first one here, they're seeking, they're wanting to put um, um, pervious paving for parking that is not required parking because and for that to not count against their maximum lot coverage. And I think this is one where I don't think we would we wouldn't treat a pervious pavement as a hard surface for that standard, but they would like clarification that they can use this in their project. And I don't see any reason why not to agree to this. Jim, did you have anything to add on this one?
No, no.
Why don't we just tell them this is a non-issue?
Well,
And
I think we can, but I think they would just like it to be clear because they think the code is not clear. I could issue multiple interpretations to sort through this, but
well, whatever gets us to the end with the least amount of work, I'm happy with. But yeah, it's surprising. It seems it's clear that pervious pavement wouldn't count.
yeah. And I
But
think the way that our code is written is we limit the amount of hard surface you're allowed to have on your property rather than impervious surface. And so a porous concrete is a hard surface, but it's pervious. And so they want it to be essentially treated as a soft surface for the purposes of
right,
the code.
and our definition of hard surface doesn't include
I
porous.
don't believe so. I don't
Okay.
believe so.
All right, I'm good.
So the next standard, with the houses with accessory dwelling units, they want to provide parking between the garages. And the amount of space between those garages actually is below what is the minimum required in our parking code. And so they're asking for relief so that they can construct parking stalls between those units and have they would be sloped to the middle with a trench drain, and that would give some additional parking in this area. Um, they're already putting this in some areas where it fits, and in other areas I think it doesn't quite fit, and they're just wanting to be able to do something that's a little non-standard in terms of parking stall dimensions.
What one of the, if I may, Jay,
Go for it.
um, this was the only one that I really had the most questions about. Um, what are the dimensions?
9 by 20 for a standard stall.
9 by 20. Okay.
Yeah, so I think
Uh,
these are either shorter or I think there's 10 feet between the buildings in all cases. So I think it has to do with the length, and then they wanted to be clear that pavers are allowed, which I think per our code we could make that interpretation, but they just tacked that request on there. I do think the request they've made is a little broad because it says they're exempt from this whole section, and really they're just asking for relief from subsections of that chapter. And so I would seek to narrow this a little bit in terms of what they're not required to do.
so the buildings, do the buildings, what are the width between the buildings?
I believe it's 10 feet.
So, with my truck that's 8 feet wide, mirror to mirror, that's a pretty tight fit.
It'd be compact.
It'd have to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is
Well,
are they agreeable to that notion, you think?
They're going to have to be because there's going to be walls that prevent
Yeah.
doors from opening.
Okay. Yeah, it looked a little tight to me, but I wasn't sure what the dimensions were.
Yeah.
Now, do we treat this as commercial or residential?
It's
Because
residential.
it is
residential.
it's
Yep.
okay. So they're all rentals. They're not selling these.
Not
Um,
not today anyway. They could in the future if they chose to sell the lots that they've created.
that's yeah, that's kind of more my concern, with the drainage that they're going to put between it and someone's door, banging the crap out of someone's house. That would be challenging. But
Right now, how is that? Is that just, for lack of better words, have they already paved this area, or is this grass drainage?
Some of the houses that have been built have these spaces already, and some people are parking on gravel. It hasn't been improved yet. So it's just I think they realize they're a little underparked for what the demand is in Port Orchard, and they're making sure that they have more parking to serve the neighborhood.
What is the parking that they're providing, the ratio currently?
I believe, is it one stall per unit, Jim?
It's yeah, it's a slightly different standard, and it has to be one stall within 1,000 feet of the dwelling, something along those lines. But it significantly reduced what our former standard was. But our current standard is even less than what the MVOD previously required.
And I would also say that, they provided on-street parking along Yarrow, and there are a handful of these little kind of parking lot, like
Mhm.
5 or 6 stall areas that are just shared parking, first come, first serve. And so they provided those additional kind of off-street or on-street parking stalls. I believe all of those are in the right of way.
So are they able to stack parking? Is this just one space?
This is just one space. I don't think they have the depth to stack parking stalls because the garage is only 20 feet deep, and then there's separation to the house,
Got
and
it.
I don't think you could get a second car in.
Okay.
yeah, and what Jay, one of the issues I could see is when that retail is built out and they need more parking, the customers are going to park on the street parking, and they're going to take up some of those little one-bedroom homes they're parking. So I can see the need for additional parking. Obviously, it wasn't planned out real well. It's an afterthought, so they're trying to literally squeeze in there. But that's what I was thinking previous when I was in that site was, that commercial, when it fills up, people are gonna be parking in those homeowners what they consider their spots. So I see it.
Well,
Yeah, and keep in mind the demand for the commercial spaces, at least during the week, is kind of opposite of the demand for residential spaces. Residential demand is highest overnight, whereas commercial is highest during the day. So they're complementary uses to some degree, but there will be times probably on the weekend when parking is going to be extra tight.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to my question is, what is that going to do with drainage? Additional space there. As far as if we go with this, granting this relief, is this something that we want to do with changes to our code? Or we wait till somebody comes in after the fact? Because I don't have a problem if we change our code. I have a problem about continuing granting changes because somebody didn't read what our standards were.
So remember, this is a change to the McCormick Village Overlay District, which only applies to this area of the city.
Right.
So we could do either path. I think because we were amending the development regulations earlier this year, the thought of layering additional code amendments onto that at the same time was more than what we could process at the time. This felt like an easier and quicker path to a solution.
Okay.
So you don't see, Nick, your department getting mired down in this in the future again?
No, because the overlay only applies to the McCormick Village master plan area. So we're changing the regulations that apply exclusively to this part of the city.
Exclusively to the overlay. Okay.
So back to the question on drainage. By hard surface in there, and this is your area, Eric. So
I'm
jump
listening.
right in there,
I'm
babe.
listening.
Just jump right in there. What's that going to do?
So they've done the analysis that they have that extra capacity in their stormwater design already. So it's not causing them a problem in terms of their facilities, but that's an engineering exercise that we go through before we can actually permit them to construct the surface. Not as far as allowing them to do it via development agreement.
Are these
They
homes
still,
built on slabs?
what's that?
Are these homes built on slabs or foundations?
I believe they're foundations.
They are foundations.
They're footings.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because we have some in McCormick that are built on slabs, so I didn't know if they did that over there because a small footprint of the home, So
Yeah.
Okay, just being catty, maybe we solve the problem by actually having people use their garage to park their cars in instead of using it as a storage facility. But that was just catty.
hey, some of us have golf carts too, Jay. All right.
Okay, next, Nick. I think we solved that one.
All right. They're asking for relief from the front. The front porch is currently allowed to encroach into the setback, and they're asking for 1 additional foot of encroachment to fit their houses. A foot is not a whole lot, and I don't have an issue with it. It does impact. It may impact them in terms of the fire ratings for porch materials based on proximity to the street, but that's a architectural problem, not a development agreement zoning code problem.
And this is strictly for building and not for overhangs?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so overhangs would be up to another, what, 18 inches further into the setback?
Depending on the design. Jim, do you know if can you confirm that the overhang?
I mean, that's a good point because the porch has to be covered. And
Yeah.
if the porch is only 2 feet off, yeah, I mean, it could end up that the roof is 6 inches away from the sidewalk.
Mhm. I'll mention that to McCormick and
I appreciate what they're trying to do, certainly. Um, but 6 inches off a property line.
And keep in mind, I mean, I think the graphic here illustrates this, but it's really only the corner of the porch, not the entire porch, because you have square buildings on a curved road.
Right, right.
So it's
It's
pretty
frankly
minor.
not a big deal to me. I just am curious.
Yeah. All right. The other variation they're seeking is that we have minimum facade variation standards in the code, and these were, I believe, carried over from our standard zoning code into the overlay district, but they're asking for some relief there um, to make it a little bit easier to meet the variation requirements. Again, I think they've done a good job with paint colors and making things architecturally distinct out there. Um, I don't have a real objection to this one, but per the letter of our code, they would have to do a bit more design work and have a bit more variation out there to meet the current letter of our code.
Again, this would apply only to the overlay district, so this is not opening Pandora's box. Is that what I heard?
Correct. Correct.
In that case, I'm good with it.
I think it makes it a better project.
Yeah. So the next one has to do with, we have a design standard that prohibits the use of T111 siding. And I think this is not a problem for them because now Hardy makes a siding that is like T111, but it's a cement fiberboard. And I don't think that that would be captured in the definition of our code now. This is one where I think we could issue an interpretation and they could still do exactly what they're proposing to do. The distinction, though, is that our code also requires masonry on the bottom of any application of board and batten, and they want to be able to not do that. Again, I don't have a real objection here. They did include these graphics showing kind of what it looks like with the board and batten going all the way to the footing. I don't think it looks bad. I really don't have a problem with it.
I've used it. I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah,
I don't have a problem with it.
no problem.
Right. Let's see. Oh, we have a couple of non-standard lots where they can't meet the letter of the code, and this is a graphic of one of these where the house and the garage have different orientations based on where they're located, and they just want some relief so that the units can have frontage where non-standard lots exist. I think this is really minor, and this is probably going to be 3 or 4 lots in the entire overlay district. I think there's only one of these lots currently in the current phase that they're building, and then in future phases there may be a few more.
How wide is the right of way in front of that lot 43?
Jim, is that one of the Wooners? I think that is the
That-
Wooner. So
that
this
is a
this
Wooner.
is yeah, this is a 20-foot right of way.
Okay.
And then finally, the last standard has to do with the commercial area. And one of the things that when we wrote the design standards, we took a lot of the standards from our downtown storefront area where you want true storefronts on the sidewalk. And what McCormick has designed here is a little different, and they didn't think much of the transparency requirements until they went to actually design these. And they're finding, number one, that all of the buildings they're designing are 4-sided buildings, and there's not a back of the building. And so they're having a really hard time designing interior spaces because they need a back wall where they can put equipment or kitchens and other
Yeah.
type of space. And so they're asking to reduce the commercial transparency standards. And I believe the graphics are shown here. These are a couple of the buildings that are proposed. And so they're trying to create consistency between the residential area and the commercial area. They're still providing quite a few windows, but it isn't the floor to ceiling windows like you see on a storefront like Bay Street, where a much higher percentage of the storefront is glass. And so I think it fits the character of the village, and it's probably an okay thing to do. The commercial is something that the city at the time really pushed them to do, and they're doing it even though it's kind of a risky thing, and they're not really expecting to make a whole lot of money on the commercial compared to the residential stuff, but it's a selling factor, and I think that this was one where we should probably be flexible.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
And
Aaron?
they
Yeah.
show the impacted structures on page 23.
Did we, do we,
Yes.
I think I asked this question previously. Do we not have in our code for the city, covered dumpsters as a requirement?
We require covered dumpsters.
Not dumpsters having lids on them, but like as far as
Enclosure, yeah.
enclosure,
like a
we
structure.
do?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's under either our
It's in
pollution.
it's in the design standards in 127, and it's
Okay.
when the only time that we can actually require the cover on that through the design standards is if it's visible from a residential building. from above. But then Public Works and West Sound Utility District, they both require that separation. Um, so there's like another drain in there, and so they separate the then that's how that cover results.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I think Plisco Apartments and Blueberry Apartments just had to do those, so we've been requiring it pretty consistently for the last few years.
Yeah, it's nice. You see that so catch basin basically, in the middle of it, but it's going to the sewer, and so that's nice. So
All right. So that's those were the seven amendments they're seeking on the village area. And I felt like those are something that I would support. I just wanted the land use committee to see them before we put time and effort into drafting an agreement and make sure that you're comfortable seeing that come forward.
I think we pretty much have consensus from the committee on that.
Yeah.
Regarding the first piece, with the development agreement, will you be bringing that back to us?
Yeah, so the next step, I will send this outline to Jennifer Robertson to have her start drafting the agreement. McCormick pays our attorney fees to do the writing of the agreement. And once we go back and forth with the developer on language, we will have them apply for the development agreement, and then we schedule a public hearing and vote on it. At this point, we're probably looking at January for taking action, or maybe even February.
Okay, so we'll see it before then, before we go back. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order?
No, it was a good
Well,
meeting.
do we need to have a December meeting, Jim? Were we going to talk about our next schedule? I think
I'll be
Jim is
out.
going to be out. So I'm thinking we might want to cancel our December 17th meeting and plan to regroup in January. Although I think I'm going to be out on the January 21st meeting, and so I don't know, maybe we do a January 14th meeting.
Yeah, we do it earlier. You'll have a new committee.
Oh,
So
right. We're doing committee assignments in January, aren't we?
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then that solves itself. So I think this is our
Right.
last meeting of this group until we do assignments.
Cool. Life is good.
Okay, I'm just
Take care.
curious, what's on the back burner for the next committee?
Not playing updates.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, I got
we've advertised the 2026 comp plan amendment cycle, and then we're beginning some work on landscape code.
We have parks also
with
coming up.
your oh, go ahead, Jay.
No, I was going to say Stormwater Park is also coming up, on that side of the coin. So there's enough to keep everybody busy.
Yeah. Does the city allow site-specific amendments to its comp plan map annually?
We do.
Okay. Have you thought about maybe not allowing it annually?
We
And
actually don't get very many of them, so it hasn't been an
yeah,
issue.
But
okay.
but also too, the council has the ability to not put it on the docket.
Yeah. Long ago, I had advice from a land use attorney who said, the comp plan is really meant to be static for a period of time, ideally until the next update. But that and this is specific to the county, if you wanted to be a little more flexible than that, you could look at a mid-cycle review. But we did our comp plan, and right away we have people wanting to change the comp plan map, and it just doesn't make sense when you've gone through such a huge exercise to adopt your comp plan and hopefully keep your vision a little bit stabilized with lack of people wanting to change change their zones. But
Yeah, if
and
we
what
had the
next?
volume that the county does, I would definitely
Right.
consider adopting that, but it just hasn't warranted
Yeah.
action.
Okay. Well, it's something to think about in terms of your workload, because I know you guys are crazy busy, generally speaking. So, maybe that's something, if you would find it helpful for your work planning, we could talk about. But it's really, it would be staff's recommendation on that. And then something that I won't be involved in a formal level, but have you gotten, I won't be involved in on the city side in a formal level, but have you gotten a response on the annexation request to the city or county?
The one that I sent to Rafe,
Yeah.
I have not yet.
Okay. All
So
right.
anyway, yeah, I had a creative solution to the county's comprehensive plan appeal.
Yeah. I appreciated that. I think there's some general discussion about maybe trying to pick up more than just commercial to include residential. But
All
I
right.
won't be involved in it from the city side.
Okay.
And I may not be involved in the county side just for the look. So
Understood. All right.
All
Well,
right.
have a nice afternoon, everyone.
Okay, Nick, are you available for a phone call?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, call you about 2 seconds. Thank you, everybody.
Sounds
all right,
good.
bye everybody.